You probably already know by now that it's in your best interest to grieve the loss of a relationship. Healthy grief releases feelings rather than allowing them to get stuck in your body, and it also allows the griever to heal the loss and move on with life. Yet, grief doesn't always heal automatically on its own. Sometimes it takes more than just the passage of time. Many of us have known people who are just stuck in their grief, and maybe you're one of them. You feel seemingly locked into the past and unable to move forward in your life. So what's the difference between those people that, feel their grief and move on, and those who just kind of get stuck in it? Well, the difference lies in what they believe they have lost. Now, let me explain. When people believe they've lost their source of love, their grief will be unending. I'll give you an example. Let's take Gary. He'd been in a 3-year relationship with Samantha when Samantha decided to end the relationship. Now, Gary was devastated. And in this relationship, like his past relationships, Gary was a taker, always trying to get love, but unable to give love or share love. And Samantha gave him a lot of love, but she often felt very lonely with him. And Gary was devastated when she left because his source of that love was gone. He wasn't grieving the loss of Samantha as a person. He was grieving the loss of her love. He was grieving as a lost, wounded child, really, rather than a loving adult. So, as a result, Gary became stuck in his grief, and he was stuck in feeling like a victim. He was stuck in that poor me mentality. And Gary had never done the inner work to develop an adult part of himself that could bring love to himself and share it with others. So he kind of felt lost, abandoned, and hurt. And no matter how much he cried, no healing occurred because he was abandoning himself. He just continued to feel alone and despairing. And sometimes he was angry at Samantha for abandoning him, and other times he was angry at himself for not being a better partner. He had many regrets that just plagued him, and a constant inner refrain was, if only I had listened more to her, maybe she wouldn't have left. If only I had told her how beautiful she is, maybe she wouldn't have left. But Frank, on the other hand, he was in deep grief over the death of his beloved wife, Beth. And he loved Beth with his whole heart, and he missed her terribly. Yet Frank's grief was totally different than Gary's grief. See, Frank missed Beth's laugh, he missed her joy, her caring for people, her sense of wonder. He missed her as a person, and he missed being able to share his love with her. Frank had no regrets because he hadn't been a taker. He had only loved Beth totally and just was deeply grateful for the time that he had with her. So, you see, Frank, he was actually fine, believe it or not. I mean, his grief certainly came in waves, and he cried when it came, but it washed through him, and he was fine again. And Frank was fine because Beth had not been the source of his sense of self. Frank had a strong, loving inner adult who was connected with a spiritual source of love and wisdom. And this was his source, not Beth's. So Frank was a person who took full responsibility for his own pain and joy, and he had never made Beth responsible for his feelings or his well-being. And because he had never abandoned himself, he could miss Beth and grieve for her without feeling abandoned, lost, or victimized and alone. Gary, on the other hand, was not fine. No matter how much sadness he released, because Samantha had been his source of love or his higher power, he had handed to her the job of defining his sense of self. So when she left, all he could feel was abandoned. And Gary had handed his inner child, or his feeling self, to Samantha. He had made Samantha responsible for his feelings. So when she left, he felt like an abandoned child. His source of love had gone away. And because Frank knew how to love himself, he knew how to love others. And within a couple of years, Frank was in another, maybe not a couple of years, but 4, 5, 6 years down the road, he began dating, and he found himself in another relationship. And, Gary, he found a relationship from, Samantha about 6 months down the road. And 6 months after that, the relationship had dissolved again. So until Gary decides to learn to take responsibility for his own feelings and needs, he'll likely continue to lose relationship after relationship and continue to be stuck in feeling like a victim of the women in his life. And if this sounds like you, or if you've recently been in a relationship that's ended and you're grieving, you just feel like you can't get over that other person, I highly recommend you visit transformgrief.com right now, because I offer tons of videos on how to overcome these feelings of grief and loss, and they apply to all different situations in life. But they are applicable to relationship loss, and they'll definitely help you get through this time and move on and start feeling better again. So check out transformgrief.com right now and really start feeling better in minutes.